Hello, world. Welcome to Early Minds, a podcast that explores the stages of child development. We will discuss topics ranging from social cultural theory to cognitive development theory and many more important aspects on developmental stages, trying to figure out what are the main theories that help us understand child development. I'm Vinay Bradley, and I'm joined by
Chloe.
And Ashley.
and today we'll be exploring the fundamental theories in developmental psychology, Jean Piaget's theory of cognitive development. Piaget's ideas have influenced how we think about children growing and learning. Today, we'll break down his 4 stages of cognitive development. We're going to look at his key concepts and discuss what worked and what didn't work in his approach. So let's start with the basics. Jean Piaget was a Swiss psychologist who was concerned with the way thinking develops in children. He observed through his own 3 children. He presented questions to them, observed their reactions and responses. He called this the clinical interview. He applied structured observation, and he believed humans adapt to their physical and social environment, which begins at birth. So some of Piaget's guiding questions were, why does a child talk? Who is she talking to? And why does she ask so many questions? Piaget proposed that children go through 4 distinct stages of cognitive development. These stages aren't just about growing up, but they're about how children start to think and make sense of the world around them. So the first stage was sensomotor stage. So it's between birth to 2 years old. Children's thinking involves seeing, hearing, moving, touching, tasting, etc. So baby's behavior is a reflex response, so such as sucking, stepping, and grasping. Later, the reflex disappears and they choose what and when to grasp. During this period, infants attain the concept of object permanence. So this means the understanding that an object and or event continues to exist even when they cannot be directly seen, heard, or touched. It requires the ability to form a mental representation, so a schema, of the object. Failure in this stage is an object that is out of sight remains out of mind, therefore it is non-existent. At the end of this stage, children develop their capacity to imitate others, which Piaget called deferred imitation. You have any questions?
I agree to all of his theories right now.
So deferred imitation is the ability to reproduce a modeled activity that has been witnessed at some point in the past. The second stage is the pre-operational stage from ages 2 to 7. Children have not yet mastered the ability to perform mental operations. Their thinking during this time is governed by what is seen. So the main achievement of this stage is they can think about things symbolically. So this is the ability to make one thing, a word or object, stand for something other than itself. The third stage, concrete operational stage, 7 to 11. So it's concerned with the integration of stability. So the child learns to add, subtract, multiply, and divide. Children develop the abilities of rational thinking, but their thinking is tied to concrete objects. Piaget considered this a major turning point because it marks the beginning of logical or operational thinking. This means a child can work things out internally in their head rather than physically try things out in the world. Stage 4, formal operational stage, from 11 years old to older. So this is the emergence of logical thinking and reasoning, the ability to think hypothetically and solve problems. Piaget believed all children go through these stages in the same order regardless of their cultural or social background. In Piaget's view, cognitive development happens because of the 2 main processes, assimilation and accommodation. Assimilation is when you take new information and try to fit it into what you already know, while accommodation is when you change your existing knowledge to make room for new information. How do you think cognitively challenged and cognitively gifted advance through these 4 stages?
So, personally, I kind of agree to all of his theories. I think curiosity is just
Part of human nature.
yeah, and
Especially when we're little kids. That's like the main thing, especially when we're babies, like everything is so new to us.
And I also think when you're younger, you tend to observe behavior and copy that. So whatever my mom did, like touching the stove or the water fountain, anything, I want to copy that same behavior because it's just
That's what you
learned.
see.
It's what I see. It's what I know. So
So it was like quite different. One would advance more and basically like disregard his like theories. So when I asked like cognitively challenged and cognitively gifted, so like a kid with disabilities and then a kid like with like a prodigy or something. While the other lacked the ability to tie schemas and equilibrium to their lives. Speaking of schemas are mental frameworks that help us organize and interpret information. When we are born, we don't have any schemas, but as we grow, we build more. So, for example, a baby is born with a sucking schema. They automatically know how to suck on something. As children interact with the world, they either assimilate new information into their existing schemas or accommodate by changing those schemas when something doesn't fit. This leads to a state of balance or equilibrium, and that's when children face new challenges that don't fit into their existing schemas. They experience disequilibrium, which motivates them to learn and adapt until they can restore balance. This process is called equilibration. Do you want to guess how his theories were like controversial? Yeah.
Controversial?
Yeah. You want to guess? Any guesses?
yeah, I think kids tend to grow up differently. Like although like the cognitive skills may be the same, I think a child's culture, environment, parents, like everything behind like who they are, it kind of defines them, like to what they do, to how they view things. So I think it just kind of depends on who the kid is and how he grew up.
No, yeah, I agree. Like, it really depends on who the kid is, and then every child is gonna go through the process like at different times. Because if it's the kid is disabled, obviously it's gonna take that child more time than somebody that is gifted or like doesn't have that disability that the other child has.
And I also think the parents, like parenting is a big factor because personally I've seen my cousin, he didn't speak until like I think it was later, and it was just kind of a parenting issue that my aunt and my uncle had, but I don't think he still reached that point in developing his cognitive skills.
Yeah, it also depends a lot of like the involvement that the parent has in how the child is growing up. Like my cousin too, like she has a learning disability, but she's still at the same stage where she doesn't know how to read because my aunt isn't giving enough priority for her to like learn how to read, learn how to do these things that are like that other kids are supposed to be doing because of her lack of involvement.
Yeah, and that was Piaget's like major issues, both of the topics. So cultural, and he underestimated the abilities of infants and overestimated the capabilities of adolescents. His tests were like really difficult for younger children to understand, which may lead to like inaccurate conclusions. So he thought that a kid in this stage is supposed to do this, but what if the kid's smarter than that?
Yeah.
Or like what if the kid's like not? So like it's exactly what y'all was saying. And he didn't fully understand how culture influenced cognitive development. So, for example, studies have shown that abnormal children in Australia developed a conservation skills later than their European counterparts. So, like we could think about it like a black and white thing. Like, if I'm white, I probably will have more advantages than a black kid. So I'm gonna have different stages of life. I'm gonna like even with the disability thing, I'm not gonna have the same stages as someone with a disability. So that's exactly right. But despite all of his criticism, Piaget had a groundbreaking impact on education. Piaget's concept of discovery learning is still widely used in education today. The idea is that children learn best when they're actively involved in a learning process, when they're exploring, discovering, and solving problems on their own. So that's like opposite of what Vygotsky was saying. Mm-hmm. Like Vygotsky was saying that we learn more when we're in a group, but he's saying that we learn more on our own. And Piaget also believed teachers can play a vital role by guiding children to the appropriate level of challenge based on their cognitive development. So this idea is to give children tasks that match their developmental stage, encouraging them to grow without overwhelming them. So this is something that we mentioned before with Vygotsky. Like like the teachers are getting to their level, and instead of like you said, instead of overwhelming them, it's encouraging them to grow at their pace by helping them and guiding them. So one question that I wanted to get personal with: what ways do you struggle in class and you wish things were differently?
Is it like a subject or just in
Just
general?
anything. Like, what is your biggest struggle in anything?
I think my biggest struggle personally is getting my ideas and speaking on it. Like I have like I can think like we're having an open discussion, and then my struggle is just like allowing myself to like speak on it and like have my ideas be like heard by others.
I think personally, probably math and science is one of my biggest difficulties in school. But at the end of the day, I try to apply myself and, learn what my teacher's teaching. But it's like, in a classroom, I feel like you get kind of caught up with everything around you, students, disruption, and it's hard to stay focused and stay on task. And then not understanding the material given to you is already confusing enough. Just adding that just makes it way more difficult. And I feel like that's kind of what other students go through. But you also have to find time for yourself to learn and study and figure out the materials.
My biggest problem is definitely like the math, like just the formulas, numbers, the X, Y, and all of that. It's a big problem for me. Like, I feel like if I had like a set of formulas like with me on a math test for every last equation and every last question, that I would be good. But like that's what he's saying, like with assimilation, like when you try to take new information and try to fit it into what you already know, that don't work for me.
Yeah.
I have to learn a whole new thing at this pace, and that just goes to prove like we can't use his stages exactly for everybody because I'm different. I can't just assimilate new math equations and formulas into my mind.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like you guys struggle with math, and then for me, like I like math. I like these equations. It's like different. So it's harder for you guys to learn math. For me, it's easier for me to learn math, and I prefer math out of all my other subjects. So yeah, it goes back to like it's different for every single person.
I think everybody has like a different way that their brains kind of function, and I feel like we're kind of good in English, history, like stuff like that, rather in math, science. It's like a whole nother language.
And then personally, I don't like history, but that's just because like it's not that I'm not good at it, but I just don't prefer it. Like it's so much easier for me to do math and something that I know the answer is right there than history where I have to like analyze it and think about it.
And then it's open for interpretation, and then everybody has a different answer. All right, well, that concludes today's episode. I hope you got some good info about Jean Piaget and that you take something and you use this in your real life.
I definitely
Thank you.
will. Thank
Bye.
you for having us.